and that's a full-blown war in Iran. Not only a full-blown war in Iran, I was just showing you an alert that came on my phone 3 minutes ago. An alert you'd expect to see in Israel. Lebanon doesn't have an alert system. Iran, I'm not sure if they do. But due to the current situation, potential missile threats, immediately seek a safe place to be close to a secure building, etc. They came in 3 minutes ago. You never know. We end up seeing something in the background that hasn't happened yet. But here we are, Colonel. So, first question, general question is, how would you describe the current situation? How bad is it? And do you expect it to get worse, or do you expect Trump to seek an off ramp? You know him pretty well.
Well, first let me point out that I think it was in August of 2023, I was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. I was up in Maine at his establishment, and he said, "Are we on the road to war with Iran?" And I said, "Yes. I have been saying we are headed to war with Iran for 3 years nonstop. To be perfectly blunt, I'm surprised it has taken this long." So there's no news for me in this particular development. I guess the next question is, where are we now in this process? To understand where we are, we need to back up a little bit and look at what might have been in the minds of people in the White House when they decided to join with Netanyahu and start this war. And I think the first thing to understand is that you always have assumptions that people make. We're very bad at assumptions because we tend to pay more attention to assumptions that please us than we do to evidence. So I think a combination of arrogance and ignorance in the White House, coupled probably with the willingness of people in the military to provide the right answer, gave us the conflict. Another reason we're in conflict is that we mirror image. We assume that the enemy thinks the way we do, or our opponent thinks the way we do, and the opponent never thinks the way we do. And then finally, I think it was
There you go.
You're not going to leave, are you?
No, I'm not going to. It's just it's happened. A few of them have happened, but just to can tell you how, for people sitting outside in the West to understand, this never happens in the Gulf. But sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's all right. So as a result, we have two different wars being fought. The war that we set out to fight was supposed to be short, sharp, and decisive. We were going to punish those terrible Iranians for all the threats they've made to Israel. Clearly a state of peaceful intentions with no expansionist ideas. And in setting out to punish these Iranians, we sat down with the Israelis and said, well, how do we do this? And the first thing that came up was this dumb idea of regime change. As though you could kill a few people at the top of a command structure or national structure and bring a nation of 93 million people that is roughly the size of Western Europe to heel. Then when it became clear that regime change wasn't going to work, we said, well, we'll have to double down and drop more bombs, fire more missiles, and compel them to accept unconditional surrender. That certainly has worked out well. In the meantime, the Iranians, who always knew this was coming, just as I said it and many other people said it, had spent the last 20 years putting together a way to survive it. And that has been their goal, to survive the inevitable onslaught of American military power. And they've done it. And not only have they survived it, but they've managed to strike back very decisively against their opponents. And they have punished everyone and anyone who worked with, supported, or cooperated with the United States and Israel. So right now, the Iranians, despite all the damage that they've taken, and they have taken substantial damage inside the country, is actually in a very strong position. We, on the other hand, have made all these strident, ill-advised demands and silly remarks, are sitting around trying to figure out what we are going to do next. Or we boast about destroying the Iranian Air Force. Well, the Iranians have not had an Air Force to speak of since the Shah left. Just isn't significant. And as far as the Navy is concerned, well, we sank the 7 frigates that were the backbone of the Navy. We're dealing with small boats, and we seem to think that that's a significant achievement. And I was listening to General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, read from what sounded like a spreadsheet from an accountant and tell us about all the sorties that we've flown and all the thousands of places we've struck and as though this was a metric for success. We've learned nothing since 1965. We went through this in Vietnam. I remember as a young man listening in 1969, 70, 71, to similar officers in uniform stand there and tell us, well, today we flew this many sorties and we dropped these many bombs and this much tonnage. And the entire time we were doing this, we were losing the war. Nobody seemed to understand that until it was too late. I think now we are genuinely in a state of confusion. And I think that President Trump, as you point out very definitely, is looking for an off-ramp. The problem is no one's going to give it to him. He can't get it. And the Iranians are in no hurry to end this because they are winning.
How do you determine winning? So when you say the Iranians are winning, by the way, I've made this statement many times that Iran doesn't want to end this war until they inflict enough damage to deter any future war. But it's hard to really tell how much success though the US is having. Obviously, CENTCOM will put out reports that they've destroyed, or especially Israel, 70-80% of the missile launchers. Iran would say, no, that's not the case because they have them underground. Seeing the amount of bombs that were dropped on the country, the amount of targets that were hit as well, and how the amount of missiles being fired have dropped significantly, even more than the 12-day war, about 95% drop. Is it fair to say that their missile launching capabilities have been degraded, but their drone manufacturing capabilities are still there, and that is their best bet to keep the Strait of Hormuz shut, to keep striking the Gulf? Everything right now with the alert I just got. We saw the Oman, one of the ports in Oman that was burning today. I'm sure you've seen that. These type of scenes you don't expect to see in the Gulf, and they continue to achieve that through their drones. They don't really need their missiles in today's age.
No, I don't agree with that. I think that they have undoubtedly lost launchers. The dramatic degradation that you're talking about, I question, because every time somebody talks about the degradation, they launch, call them Shar 2 or 3 missiles with 1,000-pound warheads that then devastate the target wherever it is. I think what you're seeing today is that they have very precise weapons. If they fire at something, they're going to hit it. It's the exact opposite of what President Trump said the other day. He said, well, they're not very accurate. Nothing could be further from the truth. They're extremely accurate. And they don't have to fire as many missiles as they previously did to reach the target. And remember, they also fired a lot of missiles at the beginning of this thing in order to deplete the arsenal of anti-missile missiles, which were in Israel and the Gulf Emirates and states, as well as with the Navy at sea. And I think they've succeeded. I mean, I'm sure that we are getting close to the bottom. This is before we reload in great numbers. We started, I think, with roughly 8,000 missiles. I don't know where we are now. The Iranians started with 45,000 missiles. There's no evidence that they're about to run out. But what we're seeing are the best, the most accurate and devastating weapons. And I got to tell you that the engineers that I've spoken to here, and I've spoken previously to engineers in Israel, warned about this. I didn't understand at the time. This is back in 2021. But the engineers are saying that the achievements of the Iranians in missile technology are dramatic. They're impressive as hell. And everything they hit, they devastate. Now we're shipping, as you know, a THAAD radar, and I presume more THAAD missiles and launchers to Israel. I wonder what
From
the people...
South Korea.
What?
From South Korea, you're talking about the ones they pulled out of South Korea.
Yeah. So I think our position is a little less robust than President Trump and his administration would like us to believe. And I think the Iranians are being very careful now. They're looking at battle damage. They're examining it with drone footage, but also with satellite imagery. And they are now hitting things with a very specific purpose to fundamentally eliminate capabilities. I think they're also holding back to see what will happen in the near future. In other words, if we are stupid enough to attack Karg Island, which we've threatened to do, then they will launch, I think, everything that you can imagine against the oil infrastructure in the Gulf. They will, of course, push back any sort of restoration of the oil infrastructure for years. So I I don't think that Iran is in a particularly bad shape. I think they've lost a lot of hospitals. They've lost schools. We've done a horrendous damage to Tehran. There's no question about it. But again, this is Persia. This country's been around for 2,700 years. It's not going anywhere. It has no intention of surrendering or capitulating. Anybody who thinks so is crazy. And I think we bet very heavily on this business of internal uprising and revolt and readiness to throw out whoever is in charge. I think if we had stayed out and not bombed, or perhaps by the fall of this year, we would have seen a different government. I think the Iranians are ready to move beyond the old Islamic Republic. All we've done is slow it down. We've retarded that development. I think it'll still happen at some point, but we've made it harder on the country to do what it would have done naturally without our interference. But here's the key. No matter who comes to power now, Mario, will hate us. We've done enormous damage. We are not going to have a friend in that country for a very, very long time.
So then, we're kind of at a crossroads right now. It seems that we're at a fork, or Trump is at a fork right now. Either he seeks an off-ramp, which I think based on his speech, based on the way I've seen him think and act with Venezuela and tackling in other instances, China, Greenland, I think he's wise enough to seek an off-ramp and not admit defeat, but also twist it into a victory somehow. We've destroyed their nuclear program, we've destroyed their missile capabilities. But I've been the optimist for a while, even when we had a discussion after the 12-day war, and I'm like, it's not going to happen again. You told me it will. And I've been wrong time and time again. I never thought we'd be here. And the alternative that's being talked about is boots on the ground, with a focus on Karg Island, which is where 90+% of the refining of Iranian oil happens. It just sounds disastrous to me with my limited experience. How would it look like if that does move ahead? Is there any scenario where boots on the ground makes sense in any way whatsoever?
No, not for us, not for the United States, absolutely not. And Mario, we haven't got the so-called boots to send. Today's United States Army is a fraction of its former self. Go back 30 years, 32, 33 years, we had 800,000 men in the Army. We were able to put 300,000 on the ground in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. We can't do that now. We don't have those forces. And remember, those forces also included the Marines. And the Marines are very lightly equipped now. At least at that point, they could fight on land because they had a lot of artillery and tanks and other things. And then finally, you got to remember that we're not really equipped, trained, or prepared for the kind of warfare that we would confront. All you have to do is take a look at eastern Ukraine and see how warfare has profoundly changed, to understand that any ground force is likely to be paralyzed unless it can gain control of the space above it. And that's a very difficult process. How do you annihilate, stop, and neutralize all of these drones that fly all over the place all the time, from the very smallest that carries perhaps a grenade to the very largest? We're not prepared for that. So if we were trying to do something like this, it probably wouldn't work out very well for us. I keep trying to get people to understand something else. They just don't get it. Today's satellite-based intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capabilities, together with the collection devices that we have that are in the sort of terrestrial environment, mean that your opponent has pretty much persistent surveillance of everything on the ground that you do. That's very important. Because it means that, let us say we decided that, well, we're very clever, we'll land on the Syrian coast because that's closer to, say, Iran. We don't have as far to march and move and so forth. Well, by the time you picked the harbor and started to bring in ships with equipment and brought in troops, you would be targeted with these missiles. They would do enormous damage. They'd kill thousands of men. In other words, how do you get out of the gate? You can't repeat what you did in 1990 and 91, this slow, ponderous buildup. It's not going to work. And then, despite the fact that I'm going to sound like a broken record because I'm sure everybody else has said this, the notion of depending exclusively on air and naval power to achieve enduring strategic outcomes is absurd. I mean, we've been through this so many times, it doesn't work. All you do is normally, make things worse. And I think that's what we've done. Now, the key thing, though, for you and for me and for everybody else to understand is something that Professor Morandi said recently. He said, we do not support the status quo. We are not going to live with the status quo. We will not live with an existential threat from Israel. We will not put up with countries across the Persian Gulf who are providing access, support, and assistance to our enemies. This is unacceptable. We need to understand that, because what he's effectively saying, Mario, is when this war ends, people like me who are Americans are out. We are not going to be allowed to reset bases in the Middle East. We're not going to be allowed to stage military power in the Middle East or any of Iran or anybody else. It's not going to happen. How can we accept that? I think we can accept it very easily because I have a different perspective. I think the world is better off when we're not basing troops on foreign soil. I've never liked it. It's a bad idea. I'm happy to get out. But in Washington, where everything is mortgaged to vanity, especially with the president, how does he accept that without saying, well, we've been defeated?
I just don't see a scenario where American troops are put out of the Gulf. Like, things must go so wrong for the US. I know they're already going wrong to an extent, but I mean, significant more damage being caused. Because I think while it's not going well for the US, Iran is being pummeled as well. You know, we've seen over 5,500 tankers struck, and Israel's going to take it to another level. They've struck their oil facilities. You saw the acid oil rain. I don't know how anyone in the world is okay with this, but there's something that Israel did, Colonel, I want to get your thoughts on. They struck an Iranian desalination plant, a water purification plant. That was very bizarre for me because Iran doesn't really need it. They've got over 30 of them. They've also got a lot of rivers, and they've got a lot of sources for water. The Gulf need those desalination plants. And if Iran responds in kind, which they've done previously, and they've already struck, I think, one in Bahrain or Qatar, if they strike desalination plants in the Gulf, then we're in a pretty scary situation where they could start to choke off the Gulf from a necessity, not a nice to have, but a necessity for the people there. My question to you is, why did Israel strike the oil depots? Why did, without American approval, according to reports, why did they strike a desalination plant in Iran? And why did the Jerusalem Post put out a false story and piss off the Emirates by saying the UAE is striking Iranian targets when the UAE was not doing so? There was no reports of them doing so. Is it the obvious, and I'm asking kind of a rhetorical question, is Israel just trying to drag the US in a prolonged war? To what extent?
Well, I think that's very true. I think they would like to have us in a state of perpetual warfare with the enemies of Israel. That's their view. But you need to come to terms with the reality. The Israelis don't care about anybody. They could care less. They don't care about anybody who is not a Jew. Let's be frank. This is the state of Jewish supremacy. This is a war of Jewish supremacy. How many times do you have to listen to someone like Netanyahu or Ben-Gvir or a host of other people tell you that? At some point, you have to take people at their word, believe what they are saying. And they don't give a damn about us. We are only useful insofar as that they can employ our military power at will in support of their goals. Is it in our interest to destroy the Iranian nation state? No. We have no interest in that. Why would we be interested in doing a thing like that? We want to trade. Trade is the lifeblood of our nation. We are a commercial state. We're not some sort of totalitarian Soviet Union that walls itself off and then tries to impose new communist regimes in other states. That's all nonsense. Israel is interested in one thing, Israel. And if Israel has to sacrifice millions of people in order for it to feel safe, in order for it to dominate the region, that is exactly what Israel is doing. Now, inside the United States, this truth is finally beginning to be felt. People are beginning to figure this out. And they're asking the question, what are we doing? What is this for? Why would we implement a draft and raise 1 million men and then move them 6,000 miles from the United States to attack people in Iran? People are asking that. What's the reason? What's the strategic purpose? Was Iran a threat to us? People know that's not true. We've been listening to all of these lies for years. Oh, the Iranians are 2 weeks from a nuclear weapon. Iran's been 2 weeks from a nuclear weapon for at least 30 years. And by the way, if they get a nuclear weapon, they're going to nuke America. Why? Why? Is there a particular reason for that? No. And remember, historically, when we went into the Gulf, we said our purpose there was to permit commercial traffic. In other words, to facilitate it, to protect it, to encourage it, not to stop it. But then under tremendous pressure from the Israeli lobby in the United States and the Zionist billionaires that back it and Israel itself, we finally decided, all right, we'll go to war and we'll get the deal that you want. We'll emasculate Iran. We'll make them bow to your interests and what you want. After all, that's happened in the Gulf. That's what the Gulf states have done. Effectively, Saudi Arabia has done that. Has anyone ridden to the rescue of Palestinians who are being murdered or expelled from their homes? Has the Egyptian army said we have a moral obligation to our brothers to cross Israel's border and protect all of these people who are being driven from their homes and killed? No. What about the Turks? What about the Turks? There's the 500-pound gorilla in the room. The largest army in NATO, powerful state, supposedly Muslim, supposedly feeling solidarity with Muslims everywhere, and what have they done? Nothing. And Syria, what's happened in Syria? We removed the moderate who actually ran the country and essentially tolerated Shiites, Jews, Armenians, Christians. We got rid of him. We replaced him with an ISIS al-Qaeda alumnus. That suits Mr. Netanyahu. That seems to suit Mr. Erdogan. But now we see the Israelis moving north in Lebanon. Eventually, the Israelis are going to move north in Syria. What will the Turks do at that point? The only nation state in the region that has said no thank you to Israel is Iran. And so it had to be attacked. It had to be destroyed. Only it refuses to be destroyed. And it refuses to capitulate. That's the stark truth.
What happens if Trump seeks an off-ramp and Iran refuses that?
Well,
they want to continue the war, as we said, to deter.
Iran has already said, we are not going to negotiate. Forget it. You've had it.
So what happens if they keep bombing Israel? What happens if their capabilities don't get eroded and the US pulls out and they keep bombing Israel to ensure it never happens again? What could Israel do next?
It presupposes that we can disengage. So I don't think Mr. Trump has had this conversation with Mr. Netanyahu. Because without us, Israel is going to have tough times. This is a world-changing event. Sykes-Picot is over. Everyone's had it. And the Muslim people who live in all of these countries have had it. Even if they're elites who are wealthy and enjoying the good life don't necessarily agree with them. The truth is, the vast majority of Muslims, Arabs, Turks, and Persians have had it. So the old Sykes-Picot arrangement was dead. So what's going to happen? I don't think we can just arbitrarily disengage. We're going to have to come to terms of some kind, and I think we know what those terms are. Iran is going to say, America out of the Gulf. And I don't think that the people that are living in the Gulf, by the time this happens, will object to that because they now know we cannot protect them. Have you been protected by the United States Armed Forces? No, we can't do it. We cannot protect them. We can't even protect Israel, although we're doubling down on trying to do that with everything that we've got. By the way, if you're in the GCC, you're watching where all the missiles are going, where all the radars are going, and the assistance. It's all going to Israel. It's not going to them. So, what are we going to say? Are we going to say no? We're going to stay in Israel, or excuse me, we're going to stay in the Gulf in perpetuity, and you just keep on bombing? I don't think so. Remember, there is this entity out there called the American people, the American electorate. They're not interested. They don't want to stay. They don't buy into this. What about the rest of the world? mean, even if everything stopped right now, how long would it take to get the oil back online? This is going to take a long time. We've done in many cases not just months of damage, but years of damage to our friends and to the Iranians. So I think we're going to have to face something. We're going to get a term like that, get out of the Gulf. So who's going to preserve access to the Persian Gulf? Well, the United States Navy hasn't done that. Do you think the United States Navy is going to sail into the Gulf right now with precision-guided missiles and drones and everything else? They'd be foolish and stupid to do so. Every time it looks like they're threatened, what do we do with the Navy? We sail away, hopefully out of range. I mean, naval forces are vulnerable. We're not stupid. We know that. So how do you handle the Persian Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz? I think you eventually have to settle on an international treaty that is guaranteed by China and Russia and India and Japan and Korea and the United States. In other words, we all agree that this is an international waterway. No one can block it. No one will block it. Eventually, we'll have to do something like that. So what else are we going to have to do? What about Mr. Netanyahu and his government? Is Iran going to stop fighting just because we tell them we don't want to fight anymore? Or are they going to say, we're not going to live with an Israel that's governed by this man Netanyahu and his party? We want regime change in Israel. What are we going to do about that? I mean, listen, this is where we're headed right now. People need to understand this. Because it's, as we say in America, put up or shut up. Either you commit all the military power of the United States against Iran and its current position in the Persian Gulf, and that includes the use of ground forces, or get out. I think we're going to shut up. Now, here's the thing we haven't talked about, that's the nuclear weapon. We're not going to use a nuclear weapon. I can tell you a lot of things about President Trump. He's not going to do that. He is justifiably opposed. He sees that as the worst thing that could happen. And he's right, it is. Because once you use it, it normalizes the use of the weapon. The Russians, the Chinese, the Pakistanis, the Indians, all of the nuclear powers will not respond positively to that development. That could have terrible consequences for Israel. Terrible consequences. They're the ones that are most likely to turn to the use of nuclear weapon, not us. And my concern from the very beginning, and still is, that Mr. Netanyahu has more authority over us than President Trump has over him in Israel. And that's because the Congress and the White House and the financial sector and media are all ultimately tied to him. The Zionist billionaires that support him and bankroll him are going to keep him in a position of power over us if we allow him. And Mr. Trump is in office because of him. And there are people on the Hill that are there because of him. So how do you disengage from this war? Excuse me, without risking a serious breach with Israel. And what that could mean here inside the United States, what the political leader does. I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question. But I don't see any evidence that the Iranians are going to change their views and their demands. If anything, this war, the damage we've done, has reinforced it. Stiffened the response to the point that they will not die.
Ironically, while we're speaking, there's a barrage of rockets, according to Israeli outlets, fired by Hezbollah. I remember the first time we chatted, it was during the war between Israel and Hezbollah. We met in Washington, and we're talking about Hezbollah being completely destroyed back then. Well, they just fired 100 rockets now while you're speaking. And that comes after I got the alert of an attack on the UAE. Now, the FBI also warned, according to ABC, that Iran could retaliate by launching drones to the west coast. Not sure how much truth there is to this or whether that's within their capabilities militarily.
I don't think
maybe
so.
Actually,
I don't think so, because I think the Iranians know that the American people are not necessarily supportive of this war. And if you know that, why would you and cause casualties and injuries to us in the United States? So I don't think so.
We're talking about Israel using a nuclear weapon, the whole Samsung protocol as a way to maintain their survival. But there's also fears that now Iran is more driven than ever to develop their own nuclear weapon. The leader that had a fatwa against developing nuclear weapons is dead. His son, we lost his, Mustafa lost his father, his mother, his wife, his son, his niece, his, I think, brother-in-law, his multiple family members that he lost. Plus, he was injured in this attack. Plus, he was already considered more radical or more critical of the US before all this happened. And now he's the new supreme leader. Wouldn't Iran be more committed to develop a nuclear weapon now as the only possible deterrence from this happening again? And then wouldn't you have, first, is that a scenario that's possible? Wouldn't that make the Middle East even more dangerous? Because now Saudi would want one, and then the dominoes will start falling where other countries want to arm up.
I think the lesson of this war is very important, and that is that if you do not have a nuclear weapon, you are always vulnerable to attack by the United States of America. That if the America doesn't like your country, doesn't like your regime, doesn't like your society, and feels that it wants something different, then you can be invaded and destroyed. Now, you can't invade Iran at this point. That's nonsense. You just look at the 1,000 miles from one end of Iran to the other. Look at the terrible terrain that you'd have to cross. That's not going to happen. But I think everybody is now going to turn around and think twice before they do not invest in a nuclear weapon. I think the tendency would be to do that. And I agree with you. I think there are probably voices in Iran who are now saying, damn it, this would not have happened to us had we had nuclear weapons. But that's a question they have to address. I mean, personally, I hate the whole idea of nuclear weapons and always have. I mean, this Stalin is not one of my favorite people. He's probably the worst criminal in the world, right behind Mao and just above Hitler. And Stalin was responsible for millions and millions of his own countrymen being killed and others. But Stalin was right about nuclear weapons. After it was used, he said, yes, nuclear weapons are political weapons. They're not military weapons because they destroy everything. There's no real military value to them. But they are politically useful insofar as they guarantee your territorial integrity. And Stalin was right.
Yeah. There's another report that came out yesterday, multiple reports. I'm going to play the video in the meantime of the barrage rockets that's flying towards Israel, just flew towards Israel just now from Hezbollah, which were meant to be completely eradicated. You can see the barrage there. There is reports from initially CBS and then CNN, and today ABC put out a report that that Iran began mining the Strait of Hormuz. Now, for people that are not keeping close track of this, there's multiple ways for Iran. You could remove the video. There's multiple ways for Iran to close the strait. They could do it just with drones and missiles, which is sufficient, really, and they would allow just the Chinese ships and Iranian cargo ships or cargo ships heading to China to pass through. Then they've got their sea drones as a way to target the ships. Now, how capable they are, depends who you ask. They've got the diesel submarines as well, a handful of them, I think a couple of dozen, about 30 of them. And then the most extreme card that Iran could play, and something they've threatened multiple times in the last 2 decades, and that's mining the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that's pretty significant because that essentially makes it impossible for any cargo ship to go through. And for a long time, demining, I don't know how capable.
Mario, do we know if that's true?
Depends who you want to believe. So CNN, CBS, ABC said yes. Macron said he has no evidence, about 2 hours ago, he has no evidence that that's happened. And experts and analysts I've spoken to, and I agree with that analysis, is that there's no point in doing that because the strait is already closed. So what's the point of mining it? Unless they put maybe, ABC said today there's a dozen mines that were laid there. And the only explanation that I would have, logical explanation, is that it's a threat. It's like, look, stop whatever it is that you're doing. Don't strike our old depots or don't strike whatever, or we're going to mine the strait and destroy the global energy industry. energy market. So that's my only assumption on why it would make sense. But what would it mean to mine the Strait of Hormuz? And do you think Iran would do it, or is there any reason they would do it?
Well, I'm not convinced at this point that they've done that. We had two reports this morning. One was from the Secretary of Energy in the Trump cabinet, and he had said that U.S. naval ships had escorted tankers through the Persian Gulf. Just another lie from the Trump administration that made no sense. That was withdrawn, the retreat was deleted. Then there came a report that a ship that was preparing to mine the straits was sunk somewhere off the coast of Oman or something. Again, I don't know. We've sunk lots of little vessels. Whether we sank a mining ship, I have no idea. I just don't know. I do know that it's not just Chinese ships that have been released through the Persian Gulf. They also, the Straits of Hormuz, they also allowed ships headed to India to go through the Straits of Hormuz. I think over time, they'll be willing to release more ships to go through there, particularly if the ownership is either neutral or refuses to help or assist us in any way. And right now, I know that Japan, that draws about 72% of its oil from the Gulf, and South Korea, somewhere is about 65, 66%. I think they're very, very upset and very disappointed in us because they are our allies, and we harm them. See, this
Europe, Asia, Gulf. Who's left?
Monumental stupidity. And somebody sent me this the other day and said, well, the recent surge in oil and liquid, LNG and so forth is about 6 to 10% here. But in Europe, it's 70 to 90%, and in Asia, 50 to 100%. But it was pointed out, electricity costs, industrial goods, monetary policy, all of these things are going to hit us here at home. And we have a very fragile economy and financial system. And really, we're turning the rest of the world into impoverished states with no energy. And currency volatility is off the charts. So the point is, we've done enormous damage to all of these states that are normally friendly to us. In fact, somebody came on this morning and said, probably true, the only two states that have benefited from this in terms of income from oil are Russia, obviously, and the United States. So I don't...
Especially when it comes to gas, Europe is screwed the most, again.
And I really think this is more evidence for the absence of any strategy. I wrote something, it's on my Substack, where I insisted when war without strategy is war without end. That's our problem. We had no real strategy, and we established what were really unattainable objectives. In other words, regime change based on the summary execution of people in charge we didn't like. That does not necessarily change regimes. What happens when a CEO is fired? They get a new one. This is not rocket science. Again, incredibly stupid assumptions that got us into trouble. Mirror imaging. And then saying, well, we would never accept this kind of damage in the United States. Surely the Iranians would. Well, we never thought the Germans and the Japanese would withstand the damage. How many times do we have to go down this stupid road and discover that we're wrong? So I think, Mario, we're headed towards some sort of arrangement that we're not going to like to end this war. And that arrangement will, whether we like it or not, probably reward Iran for withstanding this.
Colonel, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you again for your time. And I don't know how much...
Say that. I don't know if that's really true.
I don't know how every time we see each other, if the world gets worse. So when we talk again, let's see where we'll be at, because people have forgotten the Ukraine war hasn't ended. If anything, it emboldened Russia. It boosted their coffers. And Russia's in a better position than ever to continue the war. And Europe is in a worse position than ever in leading Russia and Russian gas.
I think what you described in Europe is going to cause change in European governments. exchange will benefit Russia, because the vast majority of Europeans want an end to this Ukrainian war, and they don't buy the argument that Russia wants to invade them. Of course not. Russia's not interested in it at all. So I think we're going to see what's left of Ukraine turned into a rump state with no outlet to the sea. I predict this year the Russians will take Odessa, and they will probably take de facto Kharkov. And the question is, do they move on Kiev and just end it? And before that happens, I would hope the Germans have a new government. The French either wise up or have a new government, and certainly we need a new government in London. If those things happen, then perhaps we could see some rationality return to international relations so that we can get that war over with.
I think the unintended consequences of the war in Iran could end up happening in Ukraine.
Well, remember, what were the unintended consequences of World War II? Half the world was turned over to communism. We didn't fight for that. We were so busy fighting for one thing, we lost the larger picture. And it took us 50 years to pay for it. So, we're very good at this. Stupid things.
Thank you, Colonel. Good to see you again.